My first question is,
Yes.
how did you first know that you wanted to be an actor?
When I was very young, I came from a broken home. My biological father left when I was 2 months old. And, not to get very, psychological about it, but my mother was sad all the time. And I was in charge of making her happy as a little kid. And that's what I did. I used to, entertain her. And I was actually very quiet. I got into the High School of Performing Arts when I was 14. And I can't remember how many people auditioned, thousands and thousands. And 127 or 128 made it in. And I was very quiet there. And it was a whole school of extroverts. I mean, everybody in the class was big and, they were big clowny kind of people. They were always that kid in class. I wasn't. I was always the quiet one. I was the observer. And I sat back and I watched. I loved watching people walk by the window. I loved watching people get up, and that was exciting to me. And those kinds of things planted seeds in me for what I wanted to do, the kind of artist I wanted to be. I wanted to be the kind of actor that was not the same in every single role.
And boy, you sure aren't.
Well, I try my best not to. Yeah. I think everybody, you look at every single person in here, walks differently, talks differently, acts differently, holds their shoulders differently, and I look for that kind of thing, those quirks, those
and you remember
issues.
them.
Yeah, and I try and use them. I see them all the time. I'm constantly looking for them and go, oh, I gotta use that someday, that kind of thing for the next character, for the,
So now, Fiddler on the Roof, how did you approach working on that on Tevye?
Well, there are many books about the original production. There are many books about Fiddler on the Roof. Two of them came out this past year. One is called Tradition, and the other one is called Wonder of Wonders by Elisa Solomon, which is a great book. And there's also Jerry Robbins' assistant wrote a book about the experience of working on the original production. In 1977, there was a revival at the Winter Garden Theater, and it was taped for the Lincoln Center Library. Jerry Robbins hated that revival and hated Zero Mostel's performance, so he didn't let anybody see it while he was alive. But I got special permission to go see the video of it from his estate because I was playing the role. And Zero takes a lot of liberties with the role. But it was good to see.
He takes a lot of liberties in terms of the dialogue or the action?
Yes, and both, but mostly the action. He just, he was a clown and he couldn't help himself. Now, I don't mean that in a bad sense, clown. I mean, that's a time-honored tradition, and what he did was brilliant. But in reading it's funny, in reading all the books that I read, in that book, Tradition, by Barbara Heisenberg, I want to say, one of the quotes was from Jerry Zaks, the great director, who he'd played Mottel opposite Zero on the road. And he said, basically, everybody else who does Tevye after Zero is basically just imitating Zero. And I wish I hadn't read that, but I was haunted by that quote. And I thought, there's no fucking way I'm going to do that. I have to make it my own. And so what I did was I read everything that I could about it. I'd done Fiddler with Theodore Bickel when I was 21.
And you played Mottel, right?
And no, I played Mendel, the rabbi's son. And I also I was in the chorus when I was 16 in community theater in Queens. And so I was familiar with the show. And it just, blossomed from there. I just knew I needed to learn about what happened before, and then I needed to throw it all away and make it as honest and real as possible. And that's something that Bart and I have worked on 4 productions together. Bart Shear, forgive me. And he starts everything out with, okay, There is no, this never happened before. This is a brand new production. This is really happening. It's really 1905. You really have 5 children. You're really starving. It's really, a hardship every day just to live and get by. That's where we're starting from. It's not happy villagers doing a Fiddler on the Roof, which many of the shows are. And that brought us back to a new place.
I remember that I believed instantaneously that you guys were in a village and it was hard work. Is creating a place on stage, a believable place on stage when you've only got a wheelbarrow, a table, important to you? Do you?
Well, we've got our imaginations, and that fills everything.
And you do that alone or with the company?
You do it in cahoots with your other actors and your director. All that kind of work happens in the rehearsal room, and then you bring it on stage. I honestly believe, if I believe it, they'll believe it. Yeah. I believe it fully. I can see exactly where everything is. I make sure I own that space. Right. When I walk around that stage, I know where everything is. It really goes back to, for me, it goes back to working with Bart. He starts you always from a place of reality. We had scholars come in and talk to us about what it was like living at that time. We had a rabbi come in who was an expert at that time of Judaism in the Pale of Settlement where we were, and what the rituals were like. And so everything is based on that. So everything that was done before was thrown out the window. And he brought in a choreographer, an Israeli choreographer named Hofesh Schechter, who has his own company in London. And he started out dancing Israeli folk dancing. So he has this old school dance in his body. And he brings that authenticity to the piece in a new way. And I think it all is helping and paying off. And of course, as you run the show and you keep going, it gets better and better. You know, I hope someday if people come early on in the show and then they come somewhere later in the continuum, that they'll see that the show has gotten better and richer and more real.
Did you never take a singing lesson in your life?
I've never taken singing lessons.
You've never taken a singing lesson?
No, I was always musical. My mother sang, but not professionally, but she had a pretty voice. And
you guys sang around the house a lot?
A little. You know, she would teach us songs, that kind of thing. And so I always just sang, and I try not to think about it, because if I think about it too much, then I start worrying about, oh, is that sound pretty? Is that sound? I just try and sound like, what would Tevye sound like? That's what I think about. What would Aldolfo sound like? What would this person sound? What would Luther Billis sound like? What would, whoever? And then take it from there.
That moment when you're talking on stage, and then you have to go into a song. Do you have a theory about that or a technique about going from talking to singing?
Well, that's just, every show has its own rules. In a musical, the rules are that all of a sudden you're so moved by an emotion that you can find no other way to talk about it but going, holy cow, this day is great. It's a black box I'm in. You know what I mean? And you go on from there. But because you're so moved by the emotion.
What if you're not?
Well, then, that's part of the gig. You have to be, that's part of the rules of the game. In O'Neill, you would never do that because that's not the rules of the game. It's expected to be, on the other side of the fence and very serious in a certain way. And not that musicals can't be serious, but that's just, part of the convention.
What is the difference
and you believe it.
Of working as a dramatic actor in a comedy on stage where it's not a musical? Is there a difference in your acting technique? I mean, when you're singing, you're taking in the audience in some way.
Yeah, for me, everything is reality, no matter what the piece is. I believe that from Tevye being in 1905 to, I have to believe that fully, to Aldolfo being this, larger-than-life character. And completely believe that those people would act that way. It's going back to the rules of the game. What is okay to do in this particular game, and then you try and push the envelope all the way around. Test yourself. fully believe in, making a fool of yourself at rehearsal, trying new things. I always think, I always want every character that I play to be different. So I start everything, every time I get a script and I go, oh, I'm gonna do this, and I get the job, and I started the first day, I'm thinking, this guy is gonna have a hump or something, you know what I mean? Something just completely off the wall,
So
crazy.
You were from the outside in, so to speak, also.
Yeah, oh yeah, you know what? There's that famous story about Olivier and Dustin Hoffman, doing Marathon Man, and he says, "Why don't you try acting?" When Dustin Hoffman stayed up for 3 days and wanted to do the scene, but Olivier's wrong. That works for him, but it doesn't work for Dustin Hoffman. And I'm of the opinion, whatever fucking works. Just do what works for you. You have things that push your buttons, and you know it. Some acting teachers are gonna try and teach you things, and you're gonna try it. It just doesn't work for you. If it doesn't work for you, take what does work for you, and pick and choose. Everybody is completely different. I think whatever is going to make my juices flow.
Give you the appetite.
Yeah, what the hell? I saw an interview not too long ago with Billy Crystal, and he and I forget the name of the film, but with Robert De Niro. Analyze
the
This.
Shrink, Analyze This, yeah.
And he said between takes, De Niro had to cry, and he was looking at a Hallmark commercial with puppies on his phone. That's what De Niro was doing.
That's what he was doing.
So and he went, "What is that?" And he went, whatever works. It's true, whatever works. You take in, I have certain days where I'm more emotional than others.
Yes, and
because
you use the emotion of that day?
I use the emotion of that day.
Right.
It just happens to, it's not, and it just happens to be that day where you've had this huge emotional upheaval and it happens on stage. But that doesn't mean when it's not there, I push it and make it happen. I let whatever happens that day, I try and feel it as fully as I can without, indicating, and making something that isn't real.
So you're listening very much to the house out there. You're feeling them.
You feel them when you're doing the comedy parts of it.
Musical much more than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in a Neil Simon comedy, you would feel them the same
true.
kind of way. And when you're doing a heavy drama, you definitely feel whether they're with you. Or not, you feel that you feel the silence, that you could hear a pin drop.
Yes.
That feeling, the tension in the air where they're so with you and they're on the edge of their seats.
Yes.
You hear crying.
Yes.
A lot in Fiddler.
Yes.
So they are
you.
part of it. They definitely feed you, and
Yeah.
when they're there with you, it makes the job much easier.
I
God
love that
knows.
saying, Danny, we have a good house, the house was good tonight. We
Yeah.
had a bad house tonight.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because it's not them,
Well,
or is it?
Sometimes it is. It's amazing how all of a sudden 1,800 people at our theater can have, are of one mind in one instant. They're just not. All of a sudden, they're not there. And the next day, you get up and do this. You feel like you're doing the same thing, and they go, "Rah!" They roar, and it's very subjective, isn't it? I remember years ago, I had worked with Marion Seldes many times over the years, and her first job, she told me, her first equity job was doing the beauty part on the road with Bert Lahr. It's a great, really, really funny play where he plays all these different characters. And he was so tortured and such a genius. I mean, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And he would go on stage and the audience would scream with laughter, she told me, screaming, like incredible. And he'd run off, in the middle of a quick change and go, "I'm dying out there. I'm dying. It's terrible. It's terrible. I don't know what the hell's going on. What the fuck is going on?" And he'd run out and go on, and they'd go crazy in a different character that he was playing. It'd go crazy, It's just all, how you feel that particular night too. And it's just so many things from night to night. I heard Maggie Smith and Olivier did a Othello at the National, and he was incredible that particular night, and it was amazing, like nothing anybody had ever seen before, and wept and wept, and so much so that she felt moved to go into his dressing room after and just say, "Hey, you were amazing tonight. And she saw him, and he was crying at his dressing table. So the story goes. And he was crying at his dressing table, and she said, you were amazing. And he goes, I know. I just don't know how I did it.
I was just going to ask you about that because you're in a long run, and do you hope I get that laugh or that reaction tonight, or I know I have to...
No, I mean, you want it. You know, you want them to be with you. But having said that, you know, I've come off stage, and people have been so moved by what has happened, and they just weren't a loud audience. They were a quiet, respectful audience. So that happens too, and that's absolutely fine. Everybody's experience of it is different. And
your first day of rehearsal.
Yes.
What work have you already done?
Well, if it's a revival like this, I did. You know, honestly, I worked for it. I worked on the show for 6 months, reading and researching and going over the script. I knew I had the job for 6 months, so for a year. So I really did a lot of work on it.
But when you come to the first rehearsal, you come to the first rehearsal, let's say of Fiddler. Mm-hmm. The first rehearsal, and what's there? What does the director say? What do you read the script? Do you?
Yeah, what we did for Fiddler is every experience is different. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just say, okay, we're gonna study this right now, and then this group is gonna study that right now. If it's a musical, if it's a play, then we usually gather and talk about the time. What was happening. Maybe you'll go over the script in the afternoon, starting very slowly, and you'll get through a few scenes because you're asking a lot of questions about what this particular line means. The director will give his vision, or her, or her vision of whatever they want.
Have you already broken it down? Never mind a musical now, a straight play. Have you already broken it down into beats?
No, we don't know what the beats were going to be yet.
What you're going for in each scene, or what objectives, or obstacles, or
no,
not
first day. No. It's more of a general. You can't know that stuff until you know where you are, until you know what these people lived like, who these people are. That's and so you have to know what their specifics are, and then you can start. Adding those kinds of things in. It's impossible to know what the exact beats are because once it gets on its feet, they're going to change many, many times.
Do you come to the rehearsal with the words already memorized?
I try to as much as possible.
You do?
I do, yeah.
Why is that?
Because I like to get that shit out of the way. Because I don't want to be thinking about that. That's not what I do. When people say to you, how do you learn all those lines? It's not about that. That's part of the, stuff you get out of the way. Yeah. For me. Yeah. Some people, when we did Golden Boy, Tony Shalhoub wanted to just learn it on its feet as he read, and he wanted it to come out of that. But he
could do that.
Yeah, he could do that, but it was a slower, harder process for him because of it. For me, I think it was for him. For him, that's what works for him. For me, I like to get that stuff out of the way so I can explore whether I'm making an impact on the other actor that I'm talking to. I'm saying, it's that old stupid thing. You throw a ball and, somebody throws the ball back at you. But I want to see when I throw the ball that they react and if they got it. And then they're going to throw the ball back to me. That's what you do in real life when you talk. I don't go, I really love you. I want to go, I really love you. And I want to see whether she loves me back or he loves me back or whoever.
Did anyone ever give you a direction, another actor?
Yeah, suggestions, sure.
And it was okay with you?
It depends on who it was. Yeah.
I'm dying to know if you could remember of anybody that gave you a...
Tony Randall gave me a million, little pieces of direction over the years.
Well, didn't he? He was the one who taught you about listening?
Yeah, because he was a student of Sandy Meisner. The first time I met Tony Randall was I was in the 80s. I was cast opposite him in Around the World in 80 Days, and he would go around to all these different places around the world, and it was a great conceit that every big city that he went to, he met somebody there who showed him around. And that person who he met in the 4 major cities that he went to was played by the same actor, and that was me, with different accents and different, get-ups. And I was a huge fan of his. I loved The Odd Couple. I loved his old movies, and he was quite a character. And he said, tell me about yourself. I found myself all alone with him all of a sudden, and on the first day. And I said, well, I'm about to get married. I'm about to go to grad school. And he goes, graduate school? For what? I said, for acting. He said, huh. If you had an acting class in front of you right now, what would you tell them was the most important part of acting? And I said, well so green and so in awe of him. I said, well, my favorite acting teachers always said that acting is doing and acting is reacting. And he went, ha, 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 listening. And I said, well, that's very much a part of reacting, don't you think? And he said, don't argue with me, you asshole. You should get down on your knees and thank me for telling you this. And then he stood up and said, it takes 10 years to learn how to listen. 10 years. And he walked away. And I thought, a great story for my book, if I ever write a book. But having said that, he was absolutely right. As I get older, I find that listening is the most important part of acting. I'm just talking with somebody else. I don't worry about what to do with my arms or what should I sit over. I'm just talking, and it happens naturally what you're doing, assuming you've set up the rules of the game well. And then the rest takes care of itself. The blocking takes care of itself. The emotions take care of itself.
What if you get a direction by a director who says, now I'd like you to move on that line upstage and put your glass on that table?
I'm old school and I feel obliged to give it a shot. And I always try to give what the director wants a shot. Having said that, sometimes, ironically, often you can make it work and you find things in it. Things that you sort of thought at the beginning and just don't feel connected to. But sometimes you have to say, yeah, look, I feel completely phony and I don't think he would do that. Can we try this instead? It's a collaboration. He wants or she wants you to be comfortable. And most directors will, work with you to find the best path to helping you to achieve your goals in that particular scene.
Merrily We Roll Along.
Yes.
Fabulous piece, you did it.
Yeah.
Sondheim, you did it when you were young.
I did it in college. It was the second production after the Broadway production.
And then you wrote a letter to Stephen Sondheim.
When I was in rehearsal for the show, I read it, and it's famously flawed, if you will, but it has a lot of issues. And maybe it's not flawed, maybe it's just perfect the way it is, but it has a lot of issues. And it's very difficult for the audience to relate to the main characters because they're such shits. They just are. And it goes backwards in time. So you meet them when they're at their worst and they're ugliest. And then you watch them go back to at the end of the show, they're idealistic and they've just graduated from high school or college. College, high school? I can't remember. High school, yes. But in the beginning, if you don't relate to characters or don't get into them in any kind of way or see no redeeming value in them, you think, why am I watching them? Why do I even care about these people who are ugly and wanting to go deeper into the ugliness? That's how it starts out, and it doesn't get much better for a long time. So I went, and I had trouble. My 18-year-old self was going, how do I play this character? And a friend of mine said, you should ask Stephen Sondheim. And I said, great, yeah, sure, of course, I should ask Stephen Sondheim. And he said, no, I have his address, and you should write him a letter. So I wrote him a letter, and I asked him a whole bunch of questions, and the show was very close to him. They had closed not too long before, like 4 months before, And it was a hard experience for him and Hal, I know. And within a week, I got a letter back saying, Dear Danny, all those questions would have to be answered in a letter the size of War and Peace. But look, here's my number, give me a call. Let's see if we can find a time to get together and talk about it. So a few weeks later, I found myself at his house in Turtle Bay, his townhouse, and he sits me down on the couch. He sits across from me, huge carafe of white wine, and he said, okay, what do you want to know? And so for the next 3 hours, I got an education in not just that show, but in musical theater, in theater, about his history, about how he approaches songwriting and his thoughts on the theater. I mean, everything. And in many ways, that's why I'm here today, because if Stephen Sondheim could give back to me, certainly Danny Burstein can, give back to other people as well. Aww. He taught me that, and that was a beautiful gesture on his part. And since then, I've worked with him several times.
From that meeting that you had with him, is there singularly a thing that pops out, the most important thing that you can remember, or there were too many?
He loves children. I mean, in the best sense. He said that if he weren't a songwriter, he would have been a teacher. His mother, on her deathbed, before she died, said to him, I wish I'd never had you. And he was so, he's still, I'm sure, to this day, scarred from that. And how does a genius make that into a positive, which he has. But he realizes that it's how important it is for young people to be nurtured. And that's what I took away from that. And that was something that he told me about.
I think Hammerstein nurtured him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oscar Hammerstein, of course.
You worked with the Moscow Art Theater?
I did.
In Russia?
Right. We were the first class to go study. They took 2 people from different graduate programs, graduate acting programs around the country, from the Denver Center, from ACT, NYU, some from Juilliard. And we went and studied at the Moscow Art Theater.
And what was that like?
It was like, well, it was 89, and so it was still a communist country, and it was like being on the moon. It was fantastic for working with the Russian artists. There was a famous actor, a Russian actor who's still around, who was one of the teachers, a guy named Oleg Tabakov, and he was a wonderful, wonderful actor, and he taught us all a lot, but it was like being on the moon. They didn't have toilet paper, you know what I mean? It was that kind of situation.
Wait a minute.
It was very difficult. I got on a bus, and a bus driver screamed at me because I was wearing jeans. Mr. Rich Man, huh? Screamed at me because I was wearing jeans, because jeans were a huge commodity over there. And everything was done on the black market. I brought with me several cartons of Marlboro cigarettes, and I traded them. When I first got there, I took a taxi to my hotel, which was a youth hostel kind of thing. It was really low budget everything. And I didn't know anything about it, because you could trade each cigarette for something like a shirt, like a hat. I mean, one cigarette. And I gave my cab driver, I went, oh yeah, I guess, what the hell, I gave him a box of cigarettes like that after I gave him money for the fare. And he turned around and burst into tears and thrust himself on me, because that was going to feed his family for the next 2 months. And I had no idea exactly what I was doing, but I was trying to be nice. But it was an amazing experience. They cried, I don't know if it's still the case, the way we laugh. That's what it felt like. They would cry at the drop of a hat. My God, that shirt is so beautiful. My God, and all of a sudden tears are running down their eyes. It's like wacky. They talked about their lead actress at the Moscow Art Theater. I can't remember her name. the lead actress was so good and adept at crying that she could cry with just her downstage eye. They bragged about it. You know, depending whatever side she needed to be on, she would cry with that side. It was wacky. But it wasn't a lot of laughter. It was just,
a lot of laughter.
No, it was a lot of drinking. A lot of
yes.
people brought their own glasses to parties. You know, their own vodka glasses, their own shot glasses with them. They pulled it right out of the, fill it up, you know, and put it back in their pocket. I mean, they were soused and smoking, everything smoking. It was really an interesting, fascinating experience.
Did you apply anything that you learned in Russia to when you did the Seagull?
I did. Marshall Mason directed that production on Broadway, and very much brought all that with me. I knew what the landscape was like. I knew the white birch trees. I knew the foliage and what it felt like to be on an estate, because we actually took a trip to Chekhov's estate. And so there was the main house and these little cabins that he had, a tiny little, you know how they have like one-person kind of houses now that they're popular? There was one like that painted with light blue and painted white, blue, and white, and there was a little plaque outside, and it said, in this little room, basically, with a little bit of a loft, Anton Chekhov wrote The Seagull.
Oh my God.
You know, it's fascinating.
Geez.
You want to touch the walls.
Yeah. Now, you didn't play Trigorin?
No, I didn't. John Voight played
And
Trigorin.
who did you play?
I played Yakov, who was a laborer on the estate. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it was a good company. Tyne Daly was in it, and Marshall started it off very similar to the way Peter Brook did.
Yeah.
You know, it was very, although we did a lot of improv, and then
Do you like improv? Do you like to improv?
Yeah, you know, if I understand what's going on, you know, that's a lot of fun.
Have you ever said to a director working on a new play, which I haven't even gotten into?
Oh yeah.
Can we kind of improv this?
I've done many, but I've said, can I just play? That's what I say.
Can you give an example of something?
With Drowsy Chaperone, that was a lot of playing. You know, I knew what the character, what needed to happen here, you know, at a particular moment. I did an episode of Louis with Louis C.K.
Excuse me, you're sitting on the steps. You smack your son.
Yeah.
Did you really smack your? Did that
yeah.
come out of an improv?
The smack was in the script.
Smack was
But
in the script.
everything on the stoop,
steps.
that was all improv. And he did about 16 takes, did the whole scene. It was like guerrilla TV. It was it just happened. You know, he didn't even yell places. You know, he's supposed to knock at the door, and my wife and I are inside, and all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, and we open the door, and there he is. There's Louis, and over the shoulder is his camera guy with the bright light on us, and we're going, oh, I guess we've started. You know, all right, we're better. And the woman who played my wife, ironically, I think teaches improv, and was completely thrown.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, she was like, what the hell? We didn't do any of the lines. We didn't, you know. I said, just go with it. Just talk. If you feel like there's a moment you want to say something, say it. Go. We'll all play with you. Go. You know. So that's what happened, and he would watch the playback right afterwards, because he also directed and wrote all the episodes, and then he'd go, yeah, let's do more of that. Let's do more of that, and then just go and do a whole other take.
How wonderful.
And then just play it again, and it just kept doing it over and over again.
What was your most fun movie?
I think maybe AbFab might have been the most
Yeah,
fun.
because you really.
Just because there were no rules in a bad way. I mean, it was not, you know, I got 2 pieces of direction from the director, this British director named Tristram Shapiro. And he said, Danny, can you make it bigger? And I went, yeah, you know, you're asking the wrong person, but yeah, okay, great. You know, and then everything was big. And the other piece of direction he gave me was, in that moment, do you think you can arch your back more? And I went, yeah, sure, you know. That was it. That was what I learned about character, because it was just about anything, about any piece of direction. It's just that. The rest was all just playing with Jen and Joanna, who were, like I said, genius people. And
Did you have to audition for?
South Pacific. I
Thank you.
auditioned for that. I was in the audition room 6 times over the course of a year.
No.
That's how hard that audition, that long that audition
For the
process
same
was.
character?
For the same role, same everything.
And did they say what they wanted from you when you came back, that you weren't
That's
giving
what I
them?
asked. I kept asking my agent, what do they want? Why am I, I've shown them what I can do with the role. He just wants you to come back and do more, that's all. Just do more of the same. That's Bart Shear's process of auditioning people initially.
See how they hold up, maybe.
Yeah, and also see what he can.
Time.
He also plays with the actors and sees, and goes, hey, why don't you try this? Try, and see how he wants to see how daring they can be at their audition. And when you go in an audition, don't forget it's your audition. Make it your audition. It's your time to shine. So, I used to think, to psych myself out in a way by saying, oh, I'm just auditioning for little kids, and if I were doing this thing for little kids, I would have no inhibitions whatsoever. Right. So I go in there, and every time I walk into my audition, if the seat's not the way where I like it, if the reader's not where I want them, I go, okay, is it okay if we put you over here? Because I think I see you more on this end. And they go, okay, but it's your room, and put the chair the way you want it, say what you want it, stand if you want or sit if you want, and and touch the reader if you want, whatever, just to make it it's your room. This is your time, because you have nothing to lose, nothing, and you have everything to gain. So might as well go and have a great time. It's not about oh God, I'm waiting outside and being nervous. Fuck it. You should know your stuff. You should know your stuff already, as much as possible nowadays.
When you say that, do you mean your words? Your lines as
yes,
much as possible?
and make some choices.
Yes.
So it's not, so you understand what you're doing. Right. Nowadays, they hardly give you any time.
No,
it's like the next day.
You go on tape and send it in.
It's crazy. I've done that too sometimes.
I like that.
It's weird.
It is
weird. But what I do, honestly, they want it the next morning,
That's right.
and they give you the thing. So I write out my words often right behind something, or the
Right.
person, in big cue card kind of things, anything. I put it down there sometimes. I know most of them by the time, we're ready to shoot. But if I need a little prompting, I can always go, I don't know why you would, and it looks like for the camera, yeah. Because I'm not looking at one particular place every time I need my line. It's not that.
Have you ever gotten so wound up in a role that you couldn't free yourself emotionally, that something was you couldn't get out of it? In other words, the role took over and you were emotionally too connected to it, or?
Well, at first with Fiddler on the Roof, yeah. I mean, it's so sad, and also Buddy in Follies. He's got a 30-year relationship with his wife, and he's loved her unconditionally and desperately, and she's, and his love is unrequited, and it's so sad. And they have 2 children together, and his whole life has been a sham, because she doesn't love him back. And that, I did get to. There's one scene where he tells her, I'm leaving you. But it was so sad living with that, for a year and a half. That would really hurt. And Alfred Molina, mentioned to me through somebody asking me whether I was having sleepless nights at the beginning of working on Fiddler, because he had done Fiddler 11 years ago, and that he said that was his experience. And I said, completely. You have to go there every single night. You're losing your children. I do have two sons, 23 and 20, and I know what it's like to, feel sadness when things don't go right for your children, or they're suffering in some way. You use everything you can, but in order to do something honestly, you have to dig that deep.
What happens if you can't? You're afraid?
I've never had that problem.
No?
I grew up in the business when I got my equity card when I was 19, and everybody that I was doing shows with was dying of AIDS. And they were my best friends. I've never had a problem with that. Never. I mean, it's just part of who I am, and loving other people and loving what I do, and my imagination taking over. You know, that's the most powerful thing that I have as an actor. And that's, you know, where I think, you know, that's what makes you an artist. Because you're not just saying lines, you're not doing something by rote, you're actually trying to live in this situation. And I'm at a point in my career where I can actually say no to things and choose what I want to do. And I choose projects that I care about, that have something to say. And that makes the rest fall into place.
One last question.
Yeah.
What aspect of yourself has, to your surprise, become more accessible?
I don't know. I think I'm kinder than I used to be. Right before Fiddler started, I was told I had thyroid cancer. And so for 3 weeks, they told me I had thyroid cancer. They said, just to let you know that the thyroid does not touch your vocal cords, but all the nerves that control your vocal cords run through your thyroid. So we can't guarantee, if we have to remove it, that you'll be able to sing or speak anymore. You know, so it was like, okay, all right, you know, but it was about saving my life. And let alone, I was getting ready to do Fiddler, but I thought, well, whatever, fuck Fiddler. I'm gonna save my life here and, you know, get better. And then it turned out that even though 2 other doctors and 2 other things said that I had it, I got to a guy at Weill Cornell who showed me, an expert endocrinologist, this incredible doctor, and who confirmed it with other people, because every time they did the biopsies, these huge needles that they stick in your neck, they couldn't find any cancer cells. And he put it together with why I didn't actually have thyroid cancer. And it scared the hell out of me, and it made me think a lot, and it made me go face my own mortality, of course. And I realized that I wasn't afraid to die, but I would just be sad because I'd miss all the things that my kids would do, and growing old with my wife, having grandchildren, all those kinds of things. That I wasn't, you know, if I die, I die. You know, that's gonna happen to all of us, God knows. But I would miss all those things. And because of that, and because of many things, it's made me a calmer, kinder person, I think. The great producer, director, actress Ava Le Gallienne said, "You must listen with your blood." And so every single day I go on stage, I try desperately to find something and see something and hear something that I haven't before. So it is new to me as well. And that's what keeps it fresh to me. I did South Pacific. I was putting my kids through college, you know, I had to save money, for 2.5 years. I did other jobs, you know, I'd go and do a film, I'd go and do a TV thing, but that was my main job for 2.5 years. And I found a laugh about 3 weeks before we closed. And it was so gratifying, you know, to know that it was still going on, that process was still, and it's exciting to me. I love I'm a creature of habit. I love going to the theater every night. I love, you know, talking to the doorman and high-fiving everybody, and everybody there is your equal when you walk in the door. Some people keep very separate from, you know, the stage hands, or, you know, this person or the intern, or for me, it's all about everybody working on the same job together to tell the story in the best way possible. I say, hey, I warm up on stage every day before the show. An hour before the show, I'm on stage warming up, and all the ushers are out there, you know, and they're doing the inserts, and I make sure I know their names. It's not because I'm trying to do something about that, because that's who I am. I believe that they're as important as we are. And you walk in the door and everybody's your equal. And that's what makes, look, I'm above the title with Jessica Hecht in Fiddler on the Roof. And we set the tone for the rest of the company. And we've spent our entire careers being second bananas in shows. And so we know what it's like when somebody who's at the top of the bill is an asshole. And we just, both said, no, that's not going to be the case. We are going to celebrate everybody in the show and make everybody feel special and really make sure it's about the work every single night. Keep the drama on the stage. And I believe that. We just had a girl go in recently, a swing, who just made her Broadway debut, a dancer. And at the end, at the curtain call, we all dance in a circle. We put her in the circle, in the middle of the circle, and we're patting her head, and all screaming her name, Casey. And that's what it's about. We're a family. That was a decision between the director and myself. And Deb Hecht, the vocal coach, came in a little bit, but it was mostly, we tried different things. It was more Russian at first, that sound, the big Russian feel, but it didn't, it felt too distant. And it wanted to be more Lower East Side, New York, early 1920s than thick Russian anything. It just felt more comfortable. That sound is sort of like mother's milk, saying that dialogue. Honestly, it's happened over the last 3 years. I just actually, as crazy as it is, I just said to my agent the other day, time we hung up the Jewish cap for a little while. I have a great relationship with my agents, and I wasn't just starting out, and I said, I want you to think outside the box. I'm not an average actor. I don't think anybody is, but I told them that. I want jobs that really, you would go, I never put him up for that. Put me up for that. Yeah. And I found myself in the room a lot of the time with everybody else who looked exactly like that character was supposed to look, and me. And I like that. And one day he sent me a script for a film called Noreaster. And it was a gay, deaf pedophile who worked in a pizza shop. And I went, Eureka! That's it. That's what I want to play next. Fantastic. And I knew nothing about it, but I read the script and I loved it. So I went in and I auditioned and I got it. And spent the next 2 months learning sign language, learning ASL, and crammed as much as I could to learn about, I even took a lesson in making pizzas and the whole thing.
You were wonderful in that. I saw that.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes. Thanks. It's not the most successful film, but cinematography is outrageously beautiful.
Yes, it was.
And there are a lot of good things in that film, actually. It's that kind of thing. I want to always keep trying new things, and so yes, the jobs came along, and honestly, they were great. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to pass up working with Sam Mendes, on Cabaret. And I'm so glad I did. He's a genius director, so smart. And I didn't want to pass up I didn't know whether Fiddler would happen. Bart Shear came in while I was doing Tally's Folly 3 years ago, and he said, I've been asked to do Fiddler. I'm not sure if it's going to happen even, but it's 2.5 years away. But I'd like you to play the role, but I don't know whether the producers are going to want, Danny DeVito or whoever, And I went, okay, great. And so I sat on that for a long time. But when it came around, how could I turn it down? It was too good not to play. And then recently with Indignation, that James Schamus wrote and directed, based on the Philip Roth novel. The script was so good. I get sent scripts all the time. I read it, and usually, on page 12, I go, okay, and I check my watch. I took it home, and I was reading it. I didn't look at my watch till page 98. Wow. And I was like, oh, this is so... And I didn't even realize it. And I went, oh my God, it's 1:30 in the morning. I went, oh, this is really good, you know. And I knew I had to play the role, and he's a freaking genius. You know, he wrote Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and The Ice Storm, and genius. Produced Brokeback Mountain, and I knew it was his first time directing a film, and I knew I wanted to work with him. And that was one where he just asked me to read the script and asked me if I liked it. And I was like, yeah. And he said, great, I'd like you to do it. You know, but those, you know, it's only taken me 32 years as a professional actor for that kind of thing to happen. Well, I got married. I got married very young. I had children when I was young, and I put a lot of financial barriers in front of me before I'd even established myself in any way. And so I took, but I knew I wanted those things. I knew I wanted a family as much as I wanted to be an actor. So I just sort of did it. And also there were many times where, you know, I had stupid jobs here and there just to make ends meet, but whatever, you got to do it. You know, there's an end goal. You got to think long term, long game, that's it. You have to be pragmatic about it because you're constantly, there are roadblocks thrown in your way constantly. It's very, very hard at the beginning, but you have to have that resolve that, you know, this is the only way that I'm going to be happy. I know I'm going to be happy doing this. It does make me happy. And so I continue on. And, you know, there are different things that you do, but for me, I spread myself very thin. I did a lot of different things that were all related to the business in some way. I interned in an agent's office, and then eventually got a job, you know, doing stupid sorting pictures and resumes, and, you know, anything that I could do that was related to the business. You know, somebody said, oh, they're looking for people for models for different things. I went, models? What are you talking about? He said, no, they want real people too. So, you know, sometimes back of in a print ad for whatever, a train conductor or this or that, or somebody working in a diner. You know, you look like an average person. So you know, there are jobs like that. So I made some money here and there, voiceovers. Somebody said, you know, do you do jingles? And I said, yes, I do. You know, and I managed to fall into a job that where I was for Yoplait yogurt, you know, singing, "You're my little fluffy one, my fluffy," and $45,000 for working for an hour in residuals. That took me, you know, over the course of a year and a half, I got $45,000 from working on that one thing. That took care of me for this part, you know, and then I could save a little for that. That's how I did it. You know, spread myself thin, and I tried to, you know, make all my jobs somehow related to, and I never stopped reading and seeing as much as I could as well.
Danny, thank you.
Of course,
so
yeah.
much.
Thank you.